Good morning, good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world, whatever time you're watching. Welcome to Roaring Truth with Love, and this is our Elder Crone Wisdom series. And it's our absolute pleasure to be joined by Pat Armitstead today. There's so many things that we could say about Pat and what she's done in her life because, as Michelle said when she shared it originally, is she'll tell us another thing that she's done in her life and we're like, you've done that as well? But, you know, her greatest, one of the things that is really amazing about Pat is that she's the world's first joyologist. And so we're going to talk to her today about being a joyologist, and also, as we were talking just before our call, you know, the connection between joy and grief, I think, is really something that would be great for us to explore today as well. So the other thing that I wanted to say about Pat is that, you know, she's a dynamite, and obviously so many things to share with us, and that I'm sure that we'll just scratch the surface in 1 hour. But we are, you know, we feel blessed that you're here with us, that you're in Sister Circle with us. And I think it's through our process in Sister Circle that you've decided to do this croning ceremony. So I would really love to talk about that too today, because as I said, when my youngest daughter came into womanhood last year, we did a menage ceremony, and for me the importance of ritual and ceremony is so incredibly important. So welcome, Pat, so much to talk about, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you both. Exciting to see what comes forth.
Absolutely. I think the good place to start is can you just share a little bit with us about who you are, you know, what's got you to this point in your life, and how you've shown up to be who and where you are now?
I think I was born to go on a journey to overcome doubt and find my full creative self. All along that pathway, there's been this earnest striving to get somewhere. And the passage of time has shown me that humour, creativity and compassion are kind of the three elements that have been in my helix anyway, coming through. I've always been a bit of an imp, and never been afraid to play into that. All the years I was a student nurse, I was forever in matron's office because I'd got up to something on the ward that I really shouldn't have. No one came to any harm, but so, and I wasn't conscious then. So when I look back, it's like I did that anyway. I arrived, and even though I had the starched apron and the starched kind of exterior, I was really confident to just be myself and help people move through pain. You know, all of it was about relieving pain and suffering, even though I didn't have that higher consciousness at the time when I was fulfilling on that. Fast forward to the year 2000, and then I became really present to what that had been. I guess I've also always been a bit of a disruptor. Chosen, I'll use the word alternate, chosen alternate paths, not gone with convention. And that's given me actually an extraordinary life. There are times, and it's interesting the contrast, there are times when I've wanted to be like the others, yet I would be so constrained, or I would feel so constrained if I was. So that interesting interplay between those two spaces, wanting to fit in, but also wanting to stand out. I've always painted and created. Memories when I was really tiny in the backyard with the dress-up box and the dog, and then painting all through my high school years. Wanted to go and do an arts degree, but Mum said, well, that's lovely, dear, but I think you should get a proper job. And so it was that I went nursing. Never dreamed of being a nurse, never entered my mind. And I discovered that I loved it. And there's a story from that period that's really pivotal. The first man that I ever bedbathed was a man by the name of Bob Hall. And a construction crane had fallen on Bob, and he had 35 broken bones. They brought him into casualty, and he was literally flattened. They gathered around the bedside and pretty much shook their heads and, thought he's not going to make it. But he was still alive 4 hours later, and so they risked taking him to theatre, fearing he might die on the table, and he didn't. So they're trolling him back to the recovery ward, and the conversation then was, well, the poor beggar, he'll probably be a vegetable. So Bob woke up in recovery and revealed indeed he wasn't a vegetable, and the conversation changed again then, and they said, well, he'll never walk. He was in hospital the whole 3 years of my general nurse training. He went home for the odd weekend, but that's essentially, he was just, many, many surgeries. And I saw Bob Hall every single day I was on duty, whether I was rostered to his floor or not. And Bob walked on 2 sticks to my graduation ceremony and stood up the back of the room. And when the ceremony was over, he put his hand up, or lifted that stick actually, and came forward and said, I've actually got something I'd like to say. And I'm getting a bit scared now because my mother's sitting in the front row and I've got a bit of an idea on what Bob's going to talk about. So he had this big scroll, it was about 3 feet long, and he had listed all the dreadful tricks and pranks and terrible things that I'd done to him over that 3 years. And every now and again, my mother would say, oh, Patricia, you didn't. And when he was finished, he turned to me and he said, Pat, you don't know what you did. And I never really, that was 1973, and I never really got it. I got it on one level, but I never really got it till the year 2000. I had a whole series of losses, and it really just became apparent to me. Look back then, I was not conscious in the way that I am now. But even then, I knew commitment. I was committed to that man's recovery. I was committed to showing up for him every day. Every single day I was on duty, and being a light in some way or other. And I did it even though I knew it was going to get me in matron's office if she ever heard about it. So, and knowing that the fine line between what you can and can't do. So, matron's office, I mean, we were good friends by the end. Because she got it too. She knew. She still had to say something. It's not really appropriate. Yeah, so I think that creative impulse and the willingness to express on it has been there and now is consciously there.
That's so beautiful. And the thing to me that really stands out is what you said about knowing what you can and can't do. And you were doing things that you weren't supposed to do unconsciously because you knew they were the right thing to do. And I was just reflecting on conversations we've had about your son, Michelle, Luke, and, you know, what the path he's chosen to go on. And that as a mother, that decision to trust that even if this person isn't fully conscious, that I've given them what they need to be able to make the right decisions in the moment. And, you know, you were making the right decisions in the moment, Pat, even though you weren't conscious. And for me, it was just like it was that moment of when you were speaking, it was the moment of, yes, that's it, you know. And I reflect on my time as well when I go back into my time in the army, was all of those things that you said, you know, wanting to fit in but feeling constrained, and, you know, all of those things. And yet there was that inner compass in me that knew this is what this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And that, what a beautiful, beautiful story that that you were able to experience with Bob.
So beautiful.
It's pivotal. When I do a presentation now, when I'm doing it live, I have an empty chair on the stage, and that's always for Bob.
Oh,
I dedicate
so
the space there. And, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about ceremony, and there is an instant where you can dedicate something to somebody who's been meaningful to you when you're doing something, and create a space. And it can be just as simple as drawing forth that empty chair. To have an empty chair at the table at Christmas, where loved ones who have passed might sit. All of that symbolism so helps us become connected to that which we can't always see. We might have a sense or a feeling, but for so long we've wanted, well, show it to me and then I'll believe you. And now there's a bit of a difference. So it helps people to find faith in whatever they believe in, but have some faith that even though things haven't come forward yet, that you can trust that it will be so. So, you know, my journey has been one from doubting Thomas to enduring faith. And when I toured with Patch Adams, my clown persona was doubting Thomas. And I had a puppet and love to share a story. I was sitting with Patch Adams one day on the bus, and he was telling me about his mother, who was a diabetic. And he said he was there. She had ended up having to have a limb amputated, and he was there when she woke up from the surgery, and as her eyelids are fluttering open, he's patting her hand going, there, dear, tut, tut. And as her eyes opened, he's got this big booming voice, and he said, well, Ma, now you know what it's like to have one foot in the grave. Now, only Patch could say that to his mother, because he has relationship and it has context. Someone to go in as a stranger and make that statement, it could fall like a lead balloon. So, you know, again, about knowing when you can and when you can't. And sometimes even when you can't, you can, but you've got to have courage and a certain presence to pull it off, so to speak.
Yeah, when you really believe in yourself and what you're doing in that space, the energy of that will, the receipt of that, right? That's like the reciprocity. And like what you guys were talking about before also stood out to me, the whole idea of, you know, the struggle between sort of what's acceptable or what's expected of us and what we're feeling called to do. And so that very much relates to that as well, right? Because I think that's a struggle that we can all relate to. And also we've seen, like, as we've traveled the path, the more that we do connect to ourselves and bring our true authentic selves to the world, even when it's considered deviant, it's like we're busting through that brick wall because we know that we must. We know that there's like a silence in this space, or there's something that's considered deviant, but that's, deviant. What does that mean? It's not the norm, right? It's not how you're supposed to behave as a nurse in the hospital.
Yeah.
That's all that means. But you knew that this is loving, and this is what I can bring to Bob. And I'm sure so many other people. And then you did. And so the energy that you received in return, corresponded to that. And he ended up honoring you at your graduation ceremony. So just the reciprocal nature when we do lead with our authentic selves.
And also what you said about the requirement for courage, because we need courage. And like you said, Michelle, self-belief, because there are going to be people that are going to come at us who have an opposing point of view and who believe we shouldn't be deviant. And so when we truly know, it's not even believe anymore, it's just know. When I know that this is the right thing to do and I'm courageous enough to take that step, it's okay. I know that there's going to be people who don't appreciate what I am giving to this situation, to the world, but I also know that Bob's there. And Bob is going to remind me that I don't know what I did.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be the same today when anyone shares their story. We don't know where it goes and what influence it has. And I've just seen that repeatedly, even when I give a keynote presentation. When you tell the stories that you want to tell related to who's in the room, you don't know how it's going to land and the impact it'll have. And I had a woman conference organizer, my first big conference in New Zealand in 2002. I had to borrow money because I was presenting alongside all these rich women and I wasn't quite there yet. And I always give the organizer a little bucket and spade at the very beginning of my presentation, a little ceremony I take them through, and thank them. I get the audience to thank them as well, but thank them for letting me come play in their sandpit. So a little bit of light humor acknowledges the person who's been investing all this effort, but it brings the audience into her world and mine. They get in that little moment a real essence of who I am. Well, she rang me just before Christmas, this last Christmas. She said, I've been looking for you for a long time. She said, I need you to know, she said, I've still got that bucket and spade. And it's got all kinds of jokes and poems and novelty things in it. And it's been on my desk ever since. So one little thing can create a lasting impression, and it's just an investment that was $2 probably. And then something that you bring that, someone else wouldn't uniquely think of that, but everyone's got their capacity to create their own deliverable, and to be confident to do it. It takes courage to demonstrate your art, because what if they don't like it? What if somebody criticizes? Oh, how silly is that? That's my mother used to say that to me all the time she was alive, forever. How silly could you be, Patricia, for, many and varied things. And I would show up again and again and again with certificates. Look what I've done now, Mum. But of course it was never enough, and no blame now to my mum. She was just not able to express in that form that I was looking for. Words of appreciation are my love language, and she couldn't deliver on that. So I get that now, but for years I strived to get that from her. And I really see now it doesn't have to come from where we think it's going to come. It can come from many and varied sources. At the turn of the century, after all these losses, and I discovered Joyology in a conversation with a magician from South Australia. There was a little lull. We'd been killing ourselves laughing. Little lull in the conversation, and I just got this thought, oh my God, we've got radiology, pathology, hematology, but no joyology. I'm going to be a joyologist. So I had no idea where to go with that. 2 weeks running around like chook with its head cut off. And I thought, right, let's get clever. I'm going to do a pilot. So I did a pilot in aged care. And this was immediately after a whole series of losses, including my partner of 20 years leaving with another woman, and I was bereft. But I went and did these programs in aged care, and these 29 residents, when I thought the world had left me, my family weren't speaking, hadn't since 1984, lost everything, partner's gone. I walked into this facility and they loved me, right? There was no judgment, 60 to 105 years old, and they waited. Wonder what she'll bring today. Wonder what she'll have on. Wonder what hat she's got. There were 2 ladies who would wait every day at the door. 9 o'clock, they'd be there. So it was a real message to me about let go of attachment to where your love's going to come from, and just notice what's happening.
That is a beautiful message. That's amazing. Yeah, that's so true. A lot of times within our birth families, we're just going to trigger the spaces that, our family of origin hasn't been able to heal in themselves. And I mean, of course we're going to trigger, that's sort of what the mother wound is, or, whatever type of wound we want to label it. But yeah, that trigger isn't there outside of the birth family. Right.
Yeah.
So we're really able to be received more readily. Not that it's still not, all connections are challenges, because we all have our triggers, and every time we interact, there's a potential for a trigger. But the more that we do allow ourselves to receive that love and to give it to ourselves, then the less we're going to be triggered, right? And so then that's going to feed into the connection with the other person, and we can allow them to be triggered where they're triggered, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Obviously, another reason why we're all wearing black today, ladies, the black sheep.
Yeah.
Yes. I love it. We did not plan this.
We did not plan it.
Let's all come in black. There were 2 ladies in that rest home where I did the 2 pilots, and Joan and Christina, both spinsters, both 83. And they would be there every morning. And when I'd finished the projects, which was 15 months later, I still went back to visit. And I would always see them last, because we had a little ritual that we did. They would say, we'd have our visit, and I'd say, well, I better be heading off now. And Joan would say, well, now you be good. And then Christina would say, and if you can't be good, be careful. And then Joan would say, and if you can't be careful, remember the date. Yeah? And they thought that was just so naughty, right? We'd all be in peals of laughter, and there was our moment. Just profound intimacy, right? Me still carrying a lot of grief, yet here we were. And they only saw my essence, no judgment. And I think that's the beauty of elderhood. We grow through and beyond that place of judgment, and we just they see all of it. And look, we probably did that 40 or 50 times, and it never stopped being funny.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the knock-knock joke, because it was ours.
Mm.
That was our little moment, and our shared intimacy, their little flight into, you know, naughty. And repetitiveness is really good. You know, it embeds stuff, it embeds memories. So I can't speak with any authority, but I would love to think that for the duration that we were together, and be over a 2.5 year period, that they would have access to that when I wasn't there.
Mm.
You know, and the largesse of my figure when I'd arrive, I had Doubting Thomas in my clown persona. I have a puppet, and so there was a lot of bold figures and activity. I had a little kite about this big, and if I happened to stay for lunch, then I'd fly the kite around the dining room and just be silly. I'd play noughts and crosses on the serviettes, and you know, they'd be, you know, admonishing me the whole time. Oh, you're so naughty. But loving it. Yes. So breaking the rules and lifting spirits. And when we do that, rest homes, very often they just become passive recipients of whatever you want to do. And it's really hard for staff to lift and hold the energy and hold it up. It's a mission. But when you can break through that, amazing things happen. One of the activities that I used to do, you know, if you take a really big word and you see how many little words you can make out of it, I forget what that's called. But when I first started doing that with them on a whiteboard, we might get 15 words. After 15 months, we'd get 100.
Oh, wow.
And they would gather. So what is that?
Yeah.
You know, what is that attraction? Was it really about the words? It was like that interface. What is happening here at that spot? And even there were 2 ladies there who had dementia. Still, they came and sat of their own volition. And there's intimacy in that. Just gathered, you know.
There's so much in your ability to be able to be in that environment. And I'm assuming this is, you know, this is part of your joyology work. Was this part of your joyology work, Pat? You were doing
that
this
15
work?
months, I had no idea what joyology was going to be.
Right, yeah.
And I thought, well, I've got to get clever. Let's just see what happens. So I had learnt yogic laughter, the fun you're having when you're not really having fun. And I thought, right, I'm going to do a pilot using that. Let's do that for 3 months and see what effect it has on the people. So I did that, and spirits were elevated and became self-sustaining. They started using the laughter yoga exercises. They'd pass each other in the corridor and go, ho, ho, ha, 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 and do other things from the laughter yoga. And they also took back their power. They got out of bed, basically.
Doing that right now, like when we went to the grocery store, and if we were all ho ho,
yeah.
But that's what we all need. We all need that.
Yes. So huge pattern interrupt. And then the second pilot I did, I thought when that 3 months was over, they were accredited by myself as New Zealand's first accredited laughter facility in New Zealand, and went on to achieve a world record in the Guinness Book of Records for laughing continuously for 1 hour. And I thought, if I have them do that, gosh, you know, it could be too much for some of them, they'll die. So we did rounders, just, you know, little groups, you laugh and you laugh. And then I went on and did a second, and I assessed all the residents and all the staff using Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence, and created an activities program that delivered into all of those intelligences, creating about 50 opportunities each month for the elderly to have this whole raft of activities that they could be involved in that fed into all of those areas. And doing those two programs helped me see what I could bring from the past, from my nursing experience, and I had 11 years in video production and media. And it's like, right, what of this? How do I bring this forward? It was a bit messy in the beginning. It's like, oh, so it's going to be about creativity, but it was more than that. So it took through to 2004 before I had enough sorted to have some IP. And then from there, 2004 was a big year. I worked with 4 Jungian psychotherapists, and we cast each other's body parts and made art and meaning of things that were going on in our lives. This piece behind me is a piece I made after that. It's a rebirthing piece for me. That's my face that's cast, and I'm coming again through this wire frame symbolizing the vaginal canal being reborn. And it's 3-dimensional, so the wire frames with little knobbly bits, they're all the paradox and synchronous moments, and the leaves are the leaves from the Bodhi tree where Buddha found enlightenment. You can't really see very well there, but the face is kind of dirty, and I wanted that to depict that whole notion of being unearthed, as if, you know, the soil has fallen away and, you know, you've still got crumbs and vestiges of what was holding you in before, but the reveal is happening. So from there, I created a good grief program, and that was probably one of the most difficult programs to get going, because you can imagine, I think, the response, good grief, what's good about it? People have still a very limited view and understanding of grief. And so in the end, I saw that I wasn't going to be able to deliver that as a full source of my getting income. So I made it a very boutique program, ran about 6 a year. It's a 3-day program, totally choreographed to music. And people, we share myths, legends, fairy tales, symbolism, colour, crystals, and people, I show the participants how to cast each other. They have shared their story, whatever that is. I always know the body part that needs to be cast in order to release where the pain is stored. And then they make art and meaning of that cast piece based on the learning. So that's been profound, and it's probably the fullest expression, I think, of my work over time. There are a lot of people who can't use casting, but it's just when I say just, they haven't gone to the depth that I've gone to. The last lady that I did this work with in New Zealand, her husband had been abusing her 4 boys, and they told her, and over the next month she reported him. He was arrested, went to jail. She had the wherewithal, bought a new house, got her kids into safety, and all the while her friends were saying, "You're too good. We're really worried about you. You're too good." Anyway, about 6 weeks into that journey, I worked with her one-on-one for 3 days, and she's the first person that I've seen who's really come to a place of forgiveness and compassion, truly, in that short space of time. And I cast her from her ears right down to her pubic area. There was just so much that was embodied there, as you can imagine. And when they shed the cast, it's not a physical thing. I don't lift it off them. They need to shed it a bit like a snake getting out of its skin. So they've got to work from within to lift the cast away from their body. And once people get in the groove of that, they can feel it happening. And with this lady, her body, as her cast came away from her trunk and torso, expelled this incredible amount of energy, which I haven't heard a rhino fart, but if I had, I imagine her body just, when the cast came off, it was just this like explosive fart, and we just killed ourselves laughing. And that's another intersection that I think is really curious. There's that deep grief.
I love it.
And angst and trauma, vulnerability of naked form and working that intimately, and then, you know, the fart and how we're always, oh, excuse me, a little bit embarrassed about that, and then the hugeness of it, and then hilarious laughter.
Yeah. Farting actually, I'm dying right now because in our family, farting is a huge source of laughter. We all fart. We think farting is hilarious. We were at a fall festival a couple days ago, and there was an apple cannon. And so there's a synchronicity right now because we said it sounded like a rhinoceros farting. That was exactly what it sounded like. It's like, farting is hilarious.
Farting is hilarious. It goes back to what we were talking about before we came on, though, as well, in relation to joy. And, you know, to have true joy, we need to experience all of those emotions, don't we? And I just love what you said about when a person's shedding that cast and they need to call on their spirit from within to shed that. And that's just so powerful, because when we do that, we are calling on our spirit to express fully. And that's the grief, the anger, that's everything coming through to get to this point where it is expelled like a rhinoceros fart. And then we feel this immense joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
A lot of my work, especially in this area, has been informed by Clarissa Pinkola Easties. I love her journey. And we haven't got time to tell it today, but she tells the story, and I might create an audio of it and put it on our page, about Coyote Dick. And it's just hilarious in my world. So many women, though, find it so confronting. All right. And it's like, it's for me interesting where I did a program 18 months ago, a 13-part series exploring where does our humour and our humanity intersect, and got some really good insights from the people I interviewed then. And, you know, a lot of that intersection is a place where there's a trigger.
Right.
And we can go one way or the other. Depending on, you know, life experience and what your perceptions are.
And wouldn't you say, because that's a really great, like, kind of little segue into the aspect of ceremony, because we have lost that knowing and understanding of the importance of ceremony and ritual, we don't understand ourselves completely. You know, we receive something that's a little bit confronting, and rather than leaning in and allowing ourselves to explore, we'd rather just put it over there in the too hard basket, like what you were saying before, Michelle, about us being confronting. You know, the black sheep is confronting. How do we then reintroduce ceremony? I mean, you've already talked about it before with the bucket and the chair on the stage, but how do we bring this back in? Or is it can we do it, you know, on a wide scale, or is it simply just doing these little ceremonies that we do and sharing those ceremonies with the world? And this is what I did, and people go, oh, that's a great idea. You know, what are your thoughts on that, just called you Bev because you're both so amazing, Pat.
Look, I think for myself, years ago when I was still nursing for 6 years, I ran a 79-bed rest home, and I just really saw how people were coming in and fading away and actually dying very quickly, and it concerned me. And so I read Seligman's book, Learned Helplessness, one of his first books, and I thought, oh, yes, they come in, we take away control of all activities of daily living, and they give up and die. And so I looked at how we could shift that. And one of the first things I did was I had a lot of resistance from the staff because I was only 29 at the time. They were 45 and older. Been there 10 years in the same ward, same floor, same shift. And here I was fresh out of uni, and things are going to change around here. And they would say to me, oh, you wouldn't have a clue about our job. And I thought, oh, right, okay. Yeah, I could do that. So I took about 2 months, and I took a day in everybody's role. All the shifts, all the activities. Only thing I never mastered was that big industrial polisher. And that was the difference. The patients loved it. It was just hilarious. And oh, look, I remember from those days, and again, I wasn't consciously doing it for ceremony, but I did a round every day, the whole 79 people. I saw everybody every day, and I went in the same order every day because they need that pattern. And as you get to know people, then you can be contributing. And when I first arrived there, people had their beds and the locker on the right-hand side and up against the wall. Nothing to be a convenience for the person in the bed, all about looking neat and tidy and everything matching. And over time, we changed all that, and things looked often in disarray. And, we had, I organised I forget what I called it, but for all of the things that we could get from men and women who were still there in relation to their marriage, whether that be, there was just a hat or shoes or some memento. Sometimes there were dresses, and we had this huge day. But we didn't just have the day, we had the lead up, and everyone was involved in getting all of these garments and trimmings and other nostalgic pieces together. So, look, I think even the ceremony and ritual of coming to the table together and having a cup of tea in a cup and saucer, especially for that era. They weren't born with a mug. And, they had great reverence for setting the table, the nice cloth, the china, and then engaging and sharing. So that alone in a family's circle, done consistently, would be amazing. I've been endeavouring to foster people to have a weekly virtue using the Virtue Project cards. Choose a virtue and live into that over the week. So, creating, looking for what the gap is, and sometimes we have to help people fill that because they're not seeing it. So that's where what we know helps inform, I think, the larger public to see ways and means in which they can do that. I'm not a particularly disciplined, although I was for all those years. I have been disciplined, but there's freedom, love, freedom, and spiritual intimacy are my top motivators, and freedom's really big. So I'm not good on personal discipline, if you like. I'm far more creative, go with first thought, oh, look at that shiny light. I can exercise that discipline when I need to, but I'm it's like a pinball parlor up here, you know, all the flippers and the lights and the balls going. And when that's happening, that's when I've got my best expression. But it needs to be filtered or balanced by moments of quiet. So one of the things I say to a lot of my clients is you need to find your 2 peak moments. So for me, I'm speaking and the lights go on for someone in the room. It's like, yes, there's my moment. Then when I'm painting or creating, I actually don't need anybody. There's just myself and the page. I'm not worried about, like at the moment, what's happening in Victoria. I'm not worried about anything. So, you know, and only we can find that for ourselves. And when we do, we've got to exercise the discipline to be sure we get it.
And what I just took about what you said in a nutshell is ceremony and ritual helps us or others feel valued and respected. You know, that beautiful word that you said, reverence. When we build relationship, whether it's with ourselves or whether it's with others, we feel respected and we feel valued. And that's essentially what we want, isn't it?
Yeah. My first company that I worked for in New Zealand was a private training provider. Attendance was 35%, so were outcomes not good. They had a process for disciplining their student bodies who were second chance learners, which certainly was not encouraging. So I refused actually to participate in the letters that they would send out saying, get your sorry backside in here or you're out. And instead I sat with the students and got to know them and wrote them all a 1-page letter celebrating, honouring, congratulating, even if they only ever learnt to type 12 words a minute. I was in that company for 2 years, and at the end of when I left, the attendance rate was 85%, and so were outcomes. I had written 2,000 1-page letters. So I called those letters glad mail. And when I left, I thought, well, I can't sustain that forever. I'm stepping out now on my own in my own business. However, I'm going to do 3 a day. So since the year 2000, I have sent over 20,000 pieces of glad mail, 3 a day, sometimes more, but 3 a day. I give them out at conferences. I'll organise a postie with a whistle to interrupt me and say, oh, Pat, there's mail here. And I write the mail the night before, and look, I just ask for guidance. Who needs to hear what from me tomorrow?
That's so
and so I write the cards, and then it's random who's here to receive mail. And it's interesting still, it takes a bit of work sometimes to get people to receive it.
Yeah.
People are hesitant to say, oh, me. But that's been one of my things. And I just know, I also have, I think it's the Dalai Lama, that which you wish to receive, provide for others. So since returning back to Australia, it's been a slow journey back into work, new kid on the block, don't have the fame that I had in New Zealand. And so along that journey, I've thought, right, I would like a keynote somewhere. So who can I introduce? So putting out there every week that which I would like to come into my own life. So these have been, I think, some of my ways of giving reverent expression for that which I value, but which I also know others value. And the energy that we create with that, I learned all those years ago how to create a high trust environment really quickly in nursing. And now I can do that very quickly, and it's really hard to describe how do you do that, but I know it happens. And what are we going to do then once we've done that? What are we all here for? And we've got Stephen Jenkinson says, how you set the table determines how others will eat.
Love it.
I love that. So, you know, whatever kind of table we're looking at, you know, doing a presentation, how you set the room, how you, what you bring into it.
And it brings you back into the present moment, what you're doing. It brings you into a space of where you're being inside of the doing.
Yes.
Right. And then I know for me personally, that always helps me access gratitude. Right.
Absolutely. So when you think about that aspect of what can you give to others that you would love to receive for yourself, and how you're setting the table, what's your vision for a croning ceremony? What's the vision and the purpose of that?
Stephen Jenkinson has written a book called Come of Age, The Case for Elderhood in Troubled Times. And it's a heavy read, but a well worthwhile read. And he has I've known him for some time, and he's awoken for me. We are bereft of elderhood in our culture.
Yeah.
Compared to, the American Indian, the Maori, the Aboriginal, we don't have much of a culture. Right, she'll be right, mate, is kind of the extent of it.
But also what you said about, the nursing homes, we just put them away in the nursing homes and let them be completely powerless, and then they just die.
Yeah. So, yes, exactly. And Stephen Jenkinson recently he has a farm and he has 17 staff, and he meets with them often to wax philosophical. And at one of the most recent meetings, they were discussing just this, and he said there would not be the aged deaths if we didn't have nursing homes.
Right.
If they weren't there. And he went on to expand on that. And, the essence of, that environment that we create, and the way the table's set in there, with, just the whole circumstance, and then the lesser trained people and the low wage, and so they seek work elsewhere. They're, doing 2 or 3 jobs. It's rife.
And it's an environment that's, created for us by a pathological system, right? An upside down, insane system. And, there's like, what do you feel, Pat, about sort of the underlying, reasons behind that, in terms of the wisdom and just everything that the elder has to bring the world? What are we losing by stripping themselves of themselves and locking them away in that particular way? What do you feel like we're losing?
We're losing connection to our knowing of ourselves. We don't have a deep personal history. There are some Aboriginal ceremonies coming over the next couple of months, and they're steeped in age-old wisdom. We'd be hard-pressed to remember the last 10 years. I have a montage on a DVD of my life with my son, and I've been wanting to take it off there and put it in the cloud, And my son shows no interest.
Mm.
And it's like, what is that? There's this huge disconnect, and separation. And I think part of it's been our societal thing, the striving, you know, I had my grandparents live with me all through my high school years. And when I look back, I just love it. There was Pop out in the garden, couldn't speak because he'd had a stroke, but could still, you know, potter and do things every afternoon to come home from school. And there was Nana shelling the real peas and preparing the vegetables. And we sat at the table and talked. She was old-fashioned, and, you know, I probably was irritated a bit by some of those old-fashioned things, but just the same, oh God, you know, she was genteel, and I treasure that.
Would you say that an elder, when you were talking before, we were talking before about being courageous and having that level of self-belief. When I claim my humanity, you know, if I'm thinking about a croning ceremony, or, you know, let's just use a croning ceremony. When I claim my humanity, I'm stepping into that with courage, and I have this knowing and I have this self-belief that this is who I am. And from here, I'm proclaiming this to the world. And I know that we have forgotten how to do that, but I'm choosing now to change that. And as I do so, I offer the choice for my children to actually see that, because they haven't seen it up to now.
Yeah, it's like a radical idea today.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's so beautiful and courageous because of that. That's such a gorgeous connection, sister. Totally.
Yeah. When I did my nurse training, I trained with many Filipino nurses, and there are no rest homes in the Philippines. They wouldn't dream of, you know, placing them. In our culture, it's an inconvenience. You know, we could look after them, but we choose not to. And it's more convenient to cast aside. And there's great wounding in that, conscious and unconscious, I think, for what happens when that occurs. And you know, we're seeing huge evidence of that now in what's rolled out, and the pain of these elderly people looking through a glass window and calling for their child on the other side. It's just beggars belief. So
I think it's, you know, that aspect of a croning ceremony, I'd never heard of it before you started to mention it, but it feels so powerful to me, especially for women, because we have, you know, as we age, we think that we're not as beautiful. And there's been the rhetoric over the last decade of, we're starting to realize that our humanity is beautiful as a woman, and it doesn't matter if we get wrinkles and grey hair. But that's still in the minority. So your grey hair's beautiful, Pat.
And
you know?
I so resisted
it's so
surrendering
it's
to
like
that.
silver.
You know, it's like I thought I would look old.
I feel grateful to older women who have started to lay those bricks in that path.
Yeah.
Now, as I have gray coming in, and I'm sure you do also, sister, in our 40s, there's like this opening that we can just step into.
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
so much gratitude for
yeah.
that.
I think grace is a part of that too. There's something very graceful about aging, and that, like the residents in that rest home, you step into like an all-knowing place, so you're not buffeted by the external anymore. It's a passing parade, but it doesn't have you like it did in those middle years. There's a passage of having moved on to that, and you know, I think the wisdom, you know, to be able to claim your wisdom. When I first met David Martin, whom you both would know of, I'm sure, at his Future Dreaming launch in New Zealand, we were chatting and he loved Joyology, and we were talking further, and he said, you know, Pat, he said, in the future, he said, I don't think we're going to have a name like Pat Armitstead or David Martin. We're going to be called that which we are a stand for. And I was like, oh, okay, so I would be joyful empowerment. He said yes. So
would you say that that's the essence of a crone, is to be able to claim your wisdom?
Yes. And you know, what did this whole landscape of your life like bring you to now?
And I think as well, Pat, so powerful because you know, you talked about your persona, which was Doubting Thomas, and you've had this persona of Doubting Thomas, and now you're stepping forward, and you're saying, I claim this, you know, and there's no room for Doubting Thomas in there, but Doubting Thomas actually helped you so much to get to this point.
Yes, I've written the broadest outline for a stage show called When Doubting Thomas Meets Enduring Faith, and there's a group here in Brisbane. What are they called? The Something Puppet Society. Anyway, they produce stage shows using puppets, and I so want them to help me create that. So next year might be the year to seed that, because I want the language to come through. I think the last 20 years, language has become really important to me. My partner, when he left with another woman, said, no, I don't love you, and I never loved you. And at the time, I thought, if that's true, then everything I've ever known is not true. And so I disintegrated. However, I made some choices, and those choices led me to my reintegration. I never knew I'd be creating a piece of art like that behind me, and many more. I'd always dreamed of art, but gosh, not that. So what was I saying? So language is important, and so the virtues have become important. It's like you can't choose your language if you're not sure of that which you espouse and honor. You know, if you don't know your top 10 values, just for example, it's hard to live into a higher plane of and way of being. What do you stand for?
Gosh, there's so much. We could have this conversation, like we could continue on with this conversation for ages, I think. I want to ask you the question, and Michelle can ask any others that she wanted to ask, but I want to ask you, which was what we've asked the other two ladies as well, is what is the beauty that you know exists within our humanity?
I think I think I see the beauty in our frailty, in our vulnerability. I've so often in really poignant times, when people have perhaps shared vulnerably, it has just come from me. I see your beauty. So to see beyond the external, and to see the essence. I've been supporting a young fellow in his early 40s for about 3 or 4 years now. Angriest man I think I've ever met. Hugely traumatic life. However, there was something about the essence of that young fellow that I knew could go somewhere. And there's an old black and white movie called 12 Angry Men, and it epitomizes the 12 dark elements. It's perfect. And for probably 18 months, I just kept saying to him, you need to watch that movie and you need to do your 12 Angry Men. And passage of time, and he now has. So, you know, seeing that, you know, he spent a lot of time throwing hand grenades, just all over the show. And so a trail of destruction and people going, you know, leaving bad impressions, but it's not who he really was. And nothing would change until you listen to him in a different way. And you can't do that, I think, unless you're, you know, when does that shift come that you can begin to see what's really there?
Beautiful. And as an elder, we really get in touch with our own frailty, don't we? You know, we do. We notice the grey hair, we notice the wrinkles, we notice the things that weren't there when we were young. Our body's not as movable as it was when we were in our 20s or whatever. And when we can sink into that instead of fight it, it is beautiful. And that process of which we were talking about before, I think, was self-forgiveness. And when we can have that self-forgiveness for self and be at peace with our own darkness, we will accept it so much more in others.
Yes.
Yep.
Beautiful.
There was a movie. What was the movie with all the beautifully blue painted creature people, and what was it?
Avatar?
Yes, that's one. I see you.
Brilliant movie.
Totally.
Any other questions, Michelle?
You know, I would like to just reflect, Pat, on, I know that I wrote this in my write-up for social media, but just your multifaceted pursuit of the artistry of life. I just feel like you are such a beautiful model to women, to everyone, to men as well, but of what that looks like to just, you know, keep moving forward and trusting in yourself and creating. Everything is an art form. And it is for all of us. You know, when I'm folding my children's clothes at night and putting them away, you know, that's art. And everything we do is art. And you just embody that so beautifully, and you're such an inspiration. And so I really wanted to speak that and just honor you in that space. And I also wanted to share that for myself, on my awakening path, there were several years where I would come out of some deep place that I was in as I was processing, and another dark night of the soul, you know, some deep healing crisis. And I'd be like, I forgot to laugh. Oh
Yes.
my gosh, I've forgotten to laugh. I've forgotten to have fun. I've forgotten to feel joy. Oh my gosh, do I need to put Post-it notes around? And then I'd remember again. And then I'd, you know, sort of level up, if you will, and sort of integrate more joy into whatever I had transmuted or whatever I had healed. But what I found as I traveled the path, once I got to a certain space, it was like I could recognize that the humor that I had had previously to my becoming conscious was actually a mask.
Mm.
It wasn't really my humor. And so that's why I wasn't very funny for a while, because I had to shed all that crap to find out, you know, who I am, what is funny to me, how am I funny, you know? And so being able to rediscover that has been such a joy. And that's just, it's something, you know, the first time that I met you, when I found out about your work, it was really, your work was very meaningful to me, because for me, that piece has been such a huge, you know, just a huge puzzle piece in being in the world, agreeing to be here, agreeing to be fully human. So I just
committing
that. It's not really a question, but I just wanted to make those reflections.
Yeah, being committed. You know, you said that right at the start. It's being committed. So many people are not committed. They're not committed to life.
Yes.
And having faith. I remember when I met my second partner that I was with for 20 years, he'd come to Australia, wanted to go on a working holiday. And at that point, I was matron of a hospital, and I was studying a master's, and I was going to be matron of a Sydney hospital. That was my path until I met him. And anyway, I ended up surrendering that and go on this 5-year working holiday around Australia. And it was a leap of faith. And even though we're not together now, probably the biggest thing I value is he taught me how to free fall. We went, you know, I kept saying, oh, we're not going to, we've got 20,000 behind us. And in the end, we just went, and we were never without. Never without, right? There was always more than enough. 1 year lived entirely on seafood and never went fishing. Just so many things. And hindsight now tells me, how perfect was that?
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
Because that's serving me now in this last 8-10 months.
Yeah.
I will only send you angels, right? It's something like that. I will only send you angels.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the faith that helps us remember that. It's that enduring faith. But the only way that we have that faith is to have those experiences. You know, when you said that, I remembered our 12-month experience in a camper trailer, and very similar experience. And it's only the experiences that give us the faith that we are totally supported by angels all the time.
Yeah. And we've got all these constructs sort of overhead saying, you know, earn, talking about breaking down words and what language means, earn your living, right? Earn your place in this world. Like all those, everything is just sort of, you know, enveloped by this consumerism and money. And, you know, you look at Hollywood, you look at the music industry, you know, they're all of the celebrities are talking about their pain, their suffering. I saw Lady Gaga recently on some interview, and she was talking about how she cuts herself or used to, you know, a lot of suicidal ideation. Everything is so heavy and low and like booming, you know, just the vibration. And, you know, just remembering that that's just an overlay. It's just a construct. We are here to know joy. We are here to take the 12-month camper trip or free fall, or, you know, we're here to experience all of the emotions, but that is also why we're here. And let's not forget that, right? Like, let's remember that.
Yeah, exactly.
I met a young girl years back, and we did a joint exhibition on aging, and I'm the Joyologist, and her title was Little Ray of Black. And for every 4 words I had that were, you know, positive, she had the dark. And we wrote this little book called 4 Words Backwards, which was forwards backwards, but 4 words. Yeah, so and she was like that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Pat. It was such a
you.
pleasure having you join us today and having these conversations. And yeah, we really, really appreciate it. I've really loved this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah.
Would you like to share with our viewers where they can find you, and we can add it to the comments too, but a website or an email address?
Yep. I still have my New Zealand website, so that's joyology.co.nz. On the front page, people can get a free copy of my book, Antizac, which is a play on Prozac. I wrote my own prescription way back then. And yeah, it's been very useful little book if anyone's looking for something a little different to help them on the pathway forward.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for watching and joining us today. Please comment if you feel the need to, and yeah, we just really appreciate your participation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat. Big love.
Yeah, thank you. You too.